You know, when you look at a map and your eye just gets drawn to those blank spots.
Yeah, the areas that look like there's nothing there.
Exactly. And you can't help but wonder what's actually going on in those places.
Hmm.
Well, what if those landscapes, the ones that seem, well, pretty featureless, actually hold crucial chapters, really vital clues to the huge story of human migration?
It's fascinating to think about.
Well, today on the Deep Dive, that's exactly where we're headed. We're venturing, virtually anyway, into Eyvanekey in Iran.
Yes, to look at that really interesting recent archaeological survey that came out.
That's the one.
And what's so compelling about this place, Eyvanekey, is that this seemingly quiet region, it's potentially a really vital piece of a major puzzle. We're talking about the Northern Dispersal Corridor theory.
Right, the idea of this ancient highway almost for early humans moving out of Africa and spreading across Asia.
Exactly. And, while we've had hints about this route before, from sites on the edges, a big chunk right in the middle, well, it's been pretty much a blank slate, archaeologically speaking, until now.
Right. So for you listening, our mission today is to unpack what this survey found. We're talking about the very first solid evidence suggesting early humans were present in this central part of the northern Iranian Central Desert.
A place where, honestly, we just didn't know if they'd been before.
And our guide for this is a detailed scientific paper. It lays out all the field work, the methods, and, yeah, some pretty surprising discoveries.
Okay, so to really get a handle on this, let's picture the landscape. We're talking about the northern part of the Iranian Central Desert. People often call it the NICD.
Yeah.
And it's sort of sandwiched. You've got the huge Alborz Mountains to the north, and then the massive Central Desert stretching out to the south.
Got it. So transition zone, almost.
In a way, yes. And thinking about that bigger picture, the human dispersal story, previous research has really pointed to this NICD area as a potential key route for those really early movements.
Yeah, I remember reading about that. Researchers like Vadadi Nasab, Shoei, they've been building this case for the NICD corridor for, what, over a decade now?
That's right. They laid some important groundwork, but here's the catch, or the gap, maybe.
Okay.
Well, most of the actual archaeological evidence they and others had found was kind of on the edges, on the western side of the NICD, or way over on the eastern side.
Leaving that whole central section.
Exactly. Largely uninvestigated. A bit of an enigma, really. So this new survey in Eyvanekey, it aimed squarely at that gap. It was designed to fill in that missing piece.
Okay, so it was very targeted.
Very much so. The Eyvanekey Field Project was specifically set up to probe the Paleolithic potential, the Stone Age evidence, in this central area.
And how big an area are we talking about?
It was substantial. 891 square kilometers surveyed in total in Eyvanekey County. That's in Semnan Province, southeast of Tehran, relatively speaking.
Right.
And they were strategic about where within that large area they looked. They really focused on the northern foothills of the county.
Sort of where the mountains start giving way to the plains?
Precisely. Those areas just south of the Alborz, transitioning into the flatter, puffier clay areas further south.
So it wasn't just a random search then. They had an idea where to look.
Definitely not random. They used a method called judgmental stratification.
Okay, sounds technical. What does that mean, basically?
It just means they used their expert knowledge of the landscape and where artifacts tend to be found to divide the whole survey region into 4 zones based on how likely they thought it was they'd find something.
Okay. Rating the potential.
Exactly. And Zone 1, which included those dissected hilly plains near the mountains and the northern edge of the clay flats, well, they rated that as having the highest potential.
So they put most of their effort there, like an informed treasure hunt.
A very informed treasure hunt, that's a good way to put it. And their method within those zones was systematic, too. They walked transects, recorded finds. They intensively surveyed over 65 square kilometers in total.
Wow.
Yeah. And if they found a concentration of artifacts in one spot, they'd then search the immediate area even more closely. It's a logical approach to pinpoint activity areas.
And did their informed hunch pay off? Did they find much in Zone 1?
Did it ever? It paid off big time. They didn't just find a few scattered stones. In Zone 1, they identified 7 distinct Paleolithic landscapes. 7.
7 separate areas with finds. That's incredible.
It really is. Plus, they found another interesting spot, a locality called Yusufabad over in Zone 2.
Okay, so Zone 2 wasn't entirely empty either.
No, but interestingly, Zone 3, which they'd ranked lower potential, yielded basically nothing, which kind of validates their initial assessment,
Yeah, it shows their strategy worked. So across these sites, what was the total haul?
Get this. They recorded and documented a total of 1,200 lithic artifacts.
1,200. Okay, that's a lot more than just a hint of presence. That's substantial evidence.
Absolutely. Stone tools and, importantly, the debris from making them. It's a significant number.
So what period are we talking about? When were people making these tools in Eyvanekey?
Well, when you look closely at the types of artifacts, the technology involved, the evidence points primarily towards the Middle Paleolithic and the Upper Paleolithic periods.
Okay, middle and upper. So roughly speaking, Middle Paleolithic is what, maybe 300,000 down to 40,000 years ago? And Upper Paleolithic kicks up from there.
That's the general time frame, yes. Up to maybe 12,000 years ago for the Upper Paleolithic in this context. Now, they did mention a few very scant finds that might possibly hint at the Lower Paleolithic, even earlier.
But that's less certain.
Much less certain, very inconclusive. The really clear signal, the bulk of the evidence, is definitely Middle and Upper Paleolithic activity.
Got it. And where exactly on the landscape were these sites found? Were they in caves or...
Yeah. No, interestingly, all 8 of these main locations were found out in the open on what are called dissected, inactive Pleistocene alluvial fans and old river terraces.
Okay, unpack that a bit. Alluvial fans, river terraces.
So think of ancient river systems from the Pleistocene ice ages. Alluvial fans are sort of fan-shaped deposits of gravel, sand, and silt that build up where a stream comes out of a steeper area onto a flatter plain. River terraces are like older, abandoned floodplains left higher up as the river cut down over time.
Okay. So remnants of ancient landscapes.
Exactly. These landforms were built up long ago, and then later geological processes, mainly wind and water erosion, have kind of stripped away the overlying younger sediment.
Revealing the artifacts that were left on those older surfaces. Yeah. Like nature excavating for them.
In a way, yes. And a really striking feature, almost universal across these finds, is that the artifacts are coated in this thick, dark brown layer. It's called desert varnish.
Desert varnish, I've heard of that. That takes a long time to form, right?
A very long time. Thousands, tens of thousands of years. So seeing that heavy varnish is another strong indicator that these artifacts are genuinely ancient. It's like nature's timestamp, as you said earlier.
Okay, so we have 1,200 ancient stone artifacts. Let's get into the specifics. What kind of things were they finding? What did the toolkit look like?
Well, roughly half of the entire collection was debitage.
The waste material. Flakes and chips from making the tools.
Precisely. Which is actually really informative, tells you tool production was happening right there.
Yeah.
Then about 29.5%, so nearly a third, were classified as actual tools pieces that were shaped or used for a task.
Okay.
At about 11% were cores. Those are the parent stones, the lumps of rock that they were striking the flakes off of.
Right. So focusing on the Middle Paleolithic stuff first.
Mm-hmm.
What characterized those finds?
For the most part, these were what we call flake-based assemblages, meaning the primary goal was to get usable sharp flakes off a core, and those flakes were often the tools themselves, maybe with a little modification.
And how were they knocking those flakes off? What technique?
The main signature is direct hard hammer percussion, basically hitting the core stone with another hard stone. Simple, effective.
Okay.
But interestingly, they also found definite evidence of the Levallois method. It was present in about 5% of the relevant specimens.
Levallois. That's significant, isn't it?
Right.
Even if it's only 5%, that's the more complex technique where you prepare the core carefully first.
Exactly. You shape the core in a specific way, so you can predict the shape and size of the flake you're going to detach. It shows a higher level of planning and skill, so its presence, even if not dominant, is important.
Right. What else stood out about the Middle Paleolithic tools?
Well, they noted a greater variety of tools made on flakes compared to tools made on blades, blades being those longer, more parallel-sided flakes.
Right.
And the types of tools they could identify, things like side scrapers, some quite chunky, others finer. Also, retouched points, these could well have been spear tips. Some showed hints of possible hafting, signs they might have been attached to a shaft or handle.
Wow. Evidence of composite tools.
Potentially, yes. They also found actual Levallois points, made using that technique, and a few Levallois cores, although the paper describes the cores as somewhat atypical, maybe not textbook examples.
Okay. And didn't you mention bifaces earlier?
Yeah.
Like hand axes. Were those Middle Paleolithic too?
Yes, the 3 bifaces they found seem to fit within that broad Middle Paleolithic context. They're quite noteworthy finds. One was described as amygdaloid lanceate.
Meaning almond-shaped or spearhead-shaped?
Right. They suggest it could be a kind of hand axe-like tool, maybe made with a hard hammer, or possibly what's called a symmetrical core flake. It's a bit ambiguous.
I'm the other one.
The other distinctive biface was a keel messer. That's a specific type of bifacial knife, often triangular or wedge-shaped, associated with the later Middle Paleolithic in some parts of Europe and the Near East. Finding one here is quite interesting.
Definitely adds another layer to the technology they had. You can almost picture someone crafting and using these tens of thousands of years ago.
It really brings it to life, doesn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so that's the Middle Paleolithic picture. What about the Upper Paleolithic evidence? How did that look different?
Well, in the places where they found Upper Paleolithic material, and it was often mixed in with the Middle Paleolithic stuff on these surface sites.
Right, because it's all rooted together.
Exactly. But they could distinguish characteristic Upper Paleolithic elements. The key thing was the presence of a laminar reduction sequence.
Laminar, meaning blades.
Yes, a clear focus on producing blades, those longer, thinner flakes. They also saw evidence for the use of soft hammer technique, using something like antler or softer stone, which gives you more control for detaching blades.
So a technological shift.
A definite shift. And the types of tools reflected that. They found retouched blades, often with non-prepared butts, which is typical for some Upper Paleolithic techniques. And they found a decent number of blade and bladelet cores, described as volumetric subprismatic, basically. Cores specifically shaped to efficiently knock off multiple blades.
Okay, more sophisticated blade production. Now, you mentioned earlier there's a table 1 in the paper that lists the sites. What does that tell us?
Yes. Table 1 is really useful. It gives a quick snapshot of the 8 main Paleolithic locations they identified during the survey.
Like the names you mentioned, Yusufabad?
Exactly. It lists Yusufabad, Chandab, Sangab, Hossein-abad, and a few others. And for each one, it gives the approximate number of artifacts found there, and crucially, the Paleolithic periods represented.
Oh, cool. So you can see the distribution.
Precisely. For example, Sangab yielded the most artifacts, 401 pieces, and it showed evidence for both Middle and Upper Paleolithic occupation.
A mixed site.
Right. Whereas Yusufabad, the one found in Zone 2, seems to be generally later. It had Upper Paleolithic, but also Epipaleolithic, that's the period just after the main ice age, and even some Neolithic signs.
So that table really helps visualize how these finds are spread across the landscape and through time.
It does. It provides a very clear summary of the raw findings across Eyvanekey.
Okay, so pulling this all together, we have this significant scatter of stone tools, quite a large number, across several locations in Eyvanekey, clearly dating to the Middle and Upper Paleolithic. What's the big takeaway here? What does this tell us about that whole northern dispersal corridor idea?
I think the crucial takeaway, the main punchline, is that finding such widespread distribution and really notable densities of these lithic scatters, well, it strongly bolsters the case for the NICD being a significant route for hominin dispersals during the Pleistocene.
So it wasn't just a marginal area. People were definitely here and probably repeatedly.
That's what the evidence strongly suggests, yes. This wasn't just a one-off group passing through. The sheer amount of material spread across different landscapes points towards a more substantial and probably long-term or recurrent presence in this part of the corridor.
And the fact that they found different tool technologies, Middle and Upper Paleolithic, maybe even those bifaces, does that also tell us something about who was there or how long they stayed?
It certainly implies complexity, the diversity in tool-making strategies and reduction sequences. Yeah, it suggests that people were potentially living here or returning frequently over long periods. They were engaged in various activities, needing different tools, adapting their technology over time, or perhaps different groups with different traditions were using the area.
Makes sense. But you also mentioned something about the tools being opportunistic. What does that mean, and why does it make comparisons hard?
Right. The researchers note that while they could identify clear types like scrapers, points, levallois elements, etc., a lot of the overall assemblage seems quite opportunistic. Meaning they were likely making tools as needed, perhaps using whatever suitable raw material was locally available for fairly immediate tasks, rather than always sticking to highly standardized forms. Many pieces were atypical, not perfect textbook examples.
Okay, so less formal, more functional in the moment.
Kind of, yeah. And that practical, maybe less standardized nature makes it a bit tricky to draw really direct, clean comparisons with highly formalized toolkits found in some other regions.
I see. But they were still able to make some comparisons, right?
Yeah.
How does Eyvanekey fit into the wider Middle Paleolithic picture.
They were, and it's quite interesting. They noted similarities between the Eyvanekey Middle Paleolithic and other sites within the NICD itself, like the important site of Mirak further east.
Which we know from that earlier research you mentioned.
Exactly. The similarities include things like having relatively few heavily retouched tools, low intensity of modification on many pieces, and the importance of the Levallois method, even if, as we said, it wasn't maybe as fully developed or as common as elsewhere.
So it fits a regional pattern within the proposed corridor.
It seems to, yes. But they also highlight contrasts. For example, the Eyvanekey material looks quite different from the classic Zygros Mysterion found in the mountains further south in Iran. That tradition often has different types of points and scrapers.
Okay, so distinct from the Zagros region, what about further afield?
Well, compared to places like the Levant or the Lesser Caucasus, the Levallois technique seen in Eyvanekey appears generally less developed, less sophisticated than the highly refined Levallois technologies found in those regions.
Interesting. So regional variations in how that technique was used or emphasized.
Definitely. But perhaps the most intriguing comparison they make, connecting directly back to the dispersal corridor idea, is with sites much further east along that same putative northern dispersal route. They point out similarities between the more opportunistic nature of the Eyvanekey Middle Paleolithic and assemblages found at sites like Teshiktosh in Uzbekistan.
Wow, all the way in Uzbekistan. That really does strengthen the idea of connection along that northern route, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Finding similar technological approaches, perhaps reflecting similar adaptations or movements across such a vast distance.
Okay.
Yeah, it adds significant weight to the northern dispersal corridor hypothesis. It's like finding another critical data point along that ancient path.
It really feels like piecing together a huge ancient puzzle. Okay, so this survey has clearly established Eyvanekey as an important Paleolithic area. What's next? Where does the research go from here? This survey was just the beginning, right?
Oh, absolutely the beginning.
Yeah.
This was surface survey work. It's demonstrated the potential, shown that people were there and roughly when. But the crucial next step, the holy grail, really,
is excavation. Finding sites where the layers are still intact.
Exactly. Finding actual in situ archaeological deposits, places where the artifacts haven't been eroded out and mixed up on the surface, but are still buried in their original layers, maybe alongside animal bones or charcoal for dating.
Because that would allow them to get much more precise dates.
Precisely. Finding artifacts in context would allow for absolute dating methods like radiocarbon dating for later periods or luminescence dating on the sediments. That would let them really nail down the chronology.
Pinpoint exactly when different occupations happened, maybe even understand the environment at the time.
Yes. Finding undisturbed layers is key. It could tell us so much more about who was there, when they were there, what the climate was like, what resources they were using. It opens up a whole new level of understanding.
So a lot more potentially waiting to be discovered beneath the surface in Eyvanekey.
A huge amount, potentially. This survey has really just scratched the surface, quite literally.
Okay, so to sort of wrap up our deep dive today, what's the single most important thing you think our listeners should take away from this Eyvanekey survey?
I think the absolute key finding is this. The survey gives us the first solid, widespread evidence for Middle and Upper Paleolithic human activity right in the central part of this proposed northern dispersal corridor in Iran.
Feeling that critical blank spot on the map we talked about.
Exactly. It fills a major geographical gap in our knowledge and provides really strong support for the idea that this region wasn't peripheral, but actually played a significant role in how early humans moved out of Africa and spread across the vast continent of Asia.
It's genuinely incredible, isn't it? To think that this landscape, maybe overlooked for so long, holds such fundamental clues about our deep human past.
It really is.
And it definitely leaves you wondering, if this is what a surface survey found, what else might be waiting there? What could future excavations at Eyvanekey tell us about the day-to-day lives, the challenges, the adaptations of these ancient people making their way through this part of the world tens, even hundreds of thousands of years ago? It really makes you think about just how much of our planet's archaeological story is still undiscovered, and how future finds could completely reshape our understanding of human history. It's a deeply exciting thought to end on.